Hi everyone, this is our Women's Reproductive and Health Rights presentation by Cierra and Chaya Borowski. We chose to explore this topic specifically because women's rights are always prevalent and important, but especially now with the passing of the Texas Heartbeat Act and Senate Bill 8. So we just kind of explore women's reproductive and health rights through the lens of the social work profession, advocacy, rights, and current times and what's going on right now in the world. So we hope you enjoy. Social workers respect and promote the rights of clients to self-determination and assist clients in their efforts to identify and clarify their goals. This is in accordance to the NACW Code of Ethics. Furthermore, our jobs as social workers is to ensure that our clients, our female clients and women in general, have the access and availability to services needed, that we promote and encourage policies that are in accordance to women equality and fair laws that are being passed for women, that we support professional development and continuing education for women, including women's reproductive and health rights, and that we encourage and involve ourselves in the further research for disparities and rights of women within the reproductive world. In reference to women, in accordance with this quote, self-determination related to reproductive health means that women should be granted the freedom to make decisions about their sexual activity and reproduction. So that includes policy making, education, and as social workers, it is our duty to support and provide services to women regarding reproductive health safely and non-judgmentally, allowing the client dignity, autonomy, and access to resources, which includes, as I mentioned before, availability and access of services and resources, the professional development and continuing education for women, especially in regards to their reproductive rights and health rights, and furthering and continuing our research into women's reproductive rights and health. Stakeholders in general are people or groups of people who are have a vested interest in a specific kind of clinical decision, and also in creating evidence to support that decision. This can include the patients themselves, the caregivers, patient advocacy organizations, and these stakeholders are all essential specifically in women's reproductive and health rights, because they have an incredible responsibility of supporting, researching, improving, and providing access to services and resources needed within the women's reproductive health arena. Specific stakeholders who do play a role in women's reproduction and health include healthcare professionals, institutions, policymakers, and health and related sectors, non-governmental organizations, civil society groups, multilaterals, researchers and academics, as well as the private sectors and donors. Honestly, I also feel that this may include the women themselves, maternal and pregnant women, who are also vested in the clinical decisions and evidence that supports the decisions regarding women's reproductive and health rights. So in this slide, we explore the kind of core of the social problem behind women's reproductive and health rights. I utilized the Social Work Speaks National Association of Social Workers policy statements in 2018 to 2020 to kind of further gain insight and understanding into the specifics of the social problem of women's rights. And I took a direct quote, which says, "Women's bodies have become battlegrounds on which ideological battles are waged," which essentially means that underlining the matter of women's physical, medical, emotional, and mental health, there is a larger ideological struggle over the role and rights of women in general. So behind women's reproductive and health rights is essentially women's roles and rights in general within society. There is a history of women experiencing discrimination and disempowerment within governmental policies, including lawful denial to services and medical settings, as well as poor quality services. Therefore, it is truly inequality which is the core social problem behind women's reproductive and health rights. Here we cover why women's reproductive and health rights is important to society, and kind of looking at the picture that we included in this slide, which says, I will not go quietly back to the 1950s. We see that we are currently facing, especially with the Texas Heartbeat Act and Senate Bill 8, which we further explore in the presentation, that we can kind of be pulled back decades, right? But with our progression in terms of women's rights. And it is so important, the social support and advocacy for women's reproductive and health rights. It's crucial, right? Especially right now, but always. And included within the realm of women's reproductive and health rights, there are the areas that also pertain to all Americans, which includes sexual education, cost and coverage of healthcare, and access to contraceptives. This is important, especially with the up and coming generation of teens. We have seen a spike in teen pregnancy and in teen maternal mortality. So you can see the consequences of failing to promote and provide women's reproductive and health rights are an outdated sexual education, unjust governmental legislation putting women at risk, i.e. through their abortion restrictions, increased teenage and adult maternal death rates, and higher rates of sexual abuse, which is kind of being denied to us, especially through the current Texas Heartbeat Act and Senate Bill 8 that were both just passed. So essentially, why is it important to society? Because it's affecting our spouses, our children, our future generations to come, our sisters and our neighbors. It is affecting all women right now, currently. And unless, we kind of address it, there are going to be some real dire consequences to women and society in general.
The Texas Heartbeat Act and Senate Bill 8 that bans nearly all abortions. This law explicitly criminalizes abortions after 6 weeks and calls for no exceptions, including those of rape victims. Women's constitutional rights are greatly challenged by this law. As of September 30th, 2021, the U.S. challenged Texas to oppose the abortion ban, along with other legal oppositions. The need for this policy reversal is crucial to our female citizens in America. Social activism is key to changing new laws that go against constitutional rights. Activists have proven successful in their feat on the same social issue in recent years, including in Ireland, Argentina, and most recently Mexico, where the Supreme Court ruled last week that criminalizing abortion was unconstitutional. If these strides have protected such changes that will hinder women's health and the future of their rights, we can do just so with this new Texas abortion law and fight for the reversal and stop the enactment of a law that is criminalizing our Constitution, our constitutional right to our health and protections of our own body. As social work professionals, what can we do to join the movements in fighting for women's rights? The Women's March movement. I would join the Women's March group with Executive Director Rachel O'Leary Carmona, who has taken immediate strides in protest of this law. Gathering the support from the Lone Star State and other states across the country in support of women's constitutional rights to their reproductive health. To further ignite interest in the cause, we must raise the attention of people all over the world on how this one law is not just banning abortion, but overturning a constitutional right that is precedent in our country. If this is made just so, what other rights can we predict in the future that will be overturned? Where do we draw the line in our inherent constitutional rights? We must educate the public on the ramifications and health risks that this law will pose to rape victims, women who can suffer from life-threatening pregnancies if not terminated, women who are impregnated way too young and is unable to care for a child, women who don't have the financial stability to care for a child. There's many circumstances to consider when it comes to abortion, and it's not always a case of simple termination because a pregnancy is unwanted. Women's health will be at risk if a law is made just in a system where abortion is considered a crime. Now let's consider what the new Texas law has for social work professional implications. As social workers, we understand and endorse women's rights to make healthcare decisions, including their sexual activity and reproduction. They also should receive healthcare services free from government, institutional, professional, familial, or other interpersonal limitation or coercion, according to the International Federation of Social Workers. The profession itself should advocate for women's rights and fight to uphold those rights that will be limited by the Texas abortion law. Now, this law also would jeopardize the profession when advising or answering questions to female clients about abortion or thoughts of considering the removal of an unborn child. Criminalizing, aiding, and abetting an abortion will critically hinder social work professionals who work closely with women's health. Now, the American Psychiatric Association has adopted a series of policies recognizing reproductive rights and advocating against laws and other barriers to their realization. Women's rights are inclusive of access to contraception and abortion. The new Texas abortion law that is being pushed is countering the women's rights that have been set in place for the past 50 years. In the subject of the removal of women's rights and the stance of their reproductive rights being taken away due to this Texas law, we must consider the social justice behind this new law being right or wrong. And when we discuss the topic of rights versus wrong, we also can consider the subject of good versus evil. In human nature, there's always a good side versus the evil side. In every action, there is an opposite action. So now let's consider how good versus evil is related to our subject of this new law. Can laws be good or evil? Now, the harsh contingencies of life will always be a battle between good and evil. Individuals can act with an inherent intent of doing good, but the consequences of those actions are reasoned as evil when the ramifications hinder, deprive the freedom and rights of, and cause harm to others. Considering the removal of women's rights, can we then say that this is an act of evil or of evil influence towards women's health? Now, when we think of good versus evil, we may also think of religion and how that comes into play with human rights. Religious concerns can conjure that this new law is of goodwill, that it's actually protecting the life of unborn fetuses and saving future lives. But what happens in an instance where a pregnancy will potentially take the life of the mother? We must consider the living life first, a citizen who already holds those rights and freedoms to their own body. When women's reproductive rights are taken away and their health is put at a greater risk, we can then say such a law is not of good value and can be considered evil. So our question for the presentation discussion is, as social workers, what more can we do to advocate for women's reproductive and health rights and to create a greater impact in changing the dynamic of the the enactment of the Texas Heartbeat Act and Senate Bill 8 that is currently still in progress of being made law. We look forward to reading your responses and thank you all for another successful course completion and another great learning step in our journey to becoming the next generation of social workers. We also look forward to looking at all of you guys' presentations and hope everyone has a great weekend and see you guys in the next course. Thank you.